My name is Mahlia Lindquist. I'm the executive director for the Ladies Empowerment and Action Program, or LEAP, a women's reentry program for women transitioning from prison. LEAP as an organization was first introduced to the Women's Fund not long after we were funded or founded in 2009. The Women's Fund was the very first grant that LEAP ever received. And the impact of that first grant was really immeasurable in value, because yes, it was an important source of funding, which at the time LEAP was completely self-funded by the founders. But more important is that the Women's Fund lended its credibility to LEAP by giving us a grant. It told the community at large that they recognized that the work we were doing was valuable. And as a result, other funding ended up coming through over the years. And during the years that the Women's Fund was actively giving grants to organizations throughout the community, they continued to be one of the few funders, grantors that we could rely upon. And I became involved with LEAP myself about 6 years ago. And at that time, I think that the most LEAP had ever raised in a year was $30,000. And as I myself embarked on my own nonprofit journey, the question always came up: who else funds you? And the first organization that we would put on our list is the Women's Fund. And again, that told other professionals in the grant world that we were worthy, that our work was worthwhile, and it helped us raise other funds. So in terms of the collective mission, what the Women's Fund is exactly what LEAP is all about, because I think that people put various women's organizations in a box. Well, this one does prison reentry, this one does violence against women, this one's about pay equity, maybe another one is about sex trafficking. And the truth is that there is a lot of intersectionality among all of those missions and organizations. And it has been powerful over the years to be able to network and meet other people doing this work, because we all found that while we've been pigeonholed in these small areas, the truth is that we all are about the same thing. Many people over the years have approached us to say, well, you have such a great program. Why don't you do this for men? And I think it's the same reason that the Women's Fund, they serve women and girls. The Women's Fund recognizes that the issues for women are different than men. I mean, yes, there's overlap, but in the case of women coming to prison, their path to prison and their path to healing is completely different. And we appreciate that the Women's Fund recognizes that. In the case of the work that LEAP does, we fully support reentry services for men, but there are a lot of people doing that, and they do it in a way that's different from what women actually need. And I think that's true for what the Women's Fund does overall. There's a recognition that the needs of women and girls are just different. And a lot of programming around the state and around the country that's not really recognized. And so there's that gap in services and in programming and in advocacy that the Women's Fund fills. So as far as the Women's Fund and my personal relationship, when I first started with LEAP, I was a volunteer. I had never been in the nonprofit world. I am a Miami native, but I was moving back to Miami after being gone for 12 years. And the thing that I remember is attending the quarterly meetings that the Women's Fund used to host on a variety of topics. And I can say that without exception, every single meeting was relevant to the work that LEAP does. And it also spoke to me as a person who was born a feminist and am interested in all things involving women and girls. And so moving back to Miami and really needing to reconnect with community, I wasn't working at the time. And I can still remember from those meetings, meeting women that to this day became part of my new community. Many of them I count as personal friends. Many of them have become involved in the LEAP community and have been with us through thick and thin over the years. I've really loved the opportunity to meet women at all stages of their personal and professional development. I can think of one young woman, Carson, who I connected with at one of the quarterly meetings, and she was an attorney for Americans for Immigrant Justice. And we found that even though the work that we were doing sounded different, the fact is that the same issues confronting her clients were the same issues confronting the women who have experienced incarceration, whether it was difficulty in getting employment or fair wages, or dealing with the challenges of being primary caregivers for children. And so we formed a friendship that has lasted to this day, 7 years later. So for me, the Women's Fund has been a crucial part of my network in my community at both a professional and a personal level. So being part of the Women's Fund in a place like Miami, where I think that there's a common perception of the Miami area not having a strong social safety network or a strong nonprofit community. And I feel like the Women's Fund over the years has been the center of a huge community of engaged people, and it offers a place for all of us to come together. I know I left Miami at a point in my life where I felt that I didn't belong. I was an attorney and I had been practicing and often feeling a little bit like an alien and feeling like these are not my people. And so I left. I went to Boulder, Colorado, where um, is a place that is known to be so socially progressive, and feeling like that would be my place. And I did love that place, but they were not my tribe. I loved the fact that the community there was socially progressive, but it lacked a vibrancy and a diversity that Miami has. And in coming back to Miami and getting to know the people in the Women's Fund and all the amazing people that they bring together in their circle, I was able to get the best of both worlds, a vibrant, interesting, diverse community, and also one that is progressive, that does want to make the planet a better place, to make our community more cohesive. Um, and I've seen a kinder side of Miami that I had never experienced in all of my years of growing up and living and working here. So I feel like the Women's Fund in the last year, especially, is really going in a positive direction, and one that I think is needed in our community. And that is to be a place to focus on all the many issues facing women and girls, not just one issue. Because again, I do feel like it is impossible to address one issue at a time. So, for example, housing or pay equity or employment or childcare or transportation or all of the things that go to quality of life. To address one in a vacuum is really of little value. It's important to recognize that all of these are things that are human rights, and they're human rights that are lacking throughout our society. However, in every single instance, the impact on women is more pronounced. So when we're talking about homelessness, the rates of homelessness among formerly incarcerated women, for example, are much higher than that for men who have been in prison. It is without any effect to help someone get a job if they cannot get childcare for their children, or if they can't get health care, or if they don't have access to education. And so I really would like to see the Women's Fund to continue to move toward a place where they're bringing together resources and change makers in all of these different areas. And I do hope that the Women's Fund continues to go back to a place where they're able to help provide funding for smaller organizations, because it's not just about the money. It's about having an organization that is credible, that has an amazing reputation, standing behind somebody who is trying to do the work in their community, and being willing to say, we are willing to take this first step, to provide this first grant, because that's what it takes to get other people and other funders to the table. So I would like to see the Women's Fund to continue to be a gathering place, to be a place where like-minded leaders and people in the community can come together, but also a place where they're able to help guide resources toward the many people who are here and I know are wanting to make a difference in the community. So I recently attended the Advocacy 101 course or workshop offered by the Women's Fund. In the 13 years that since LEAP was founded, we have never been successful in getting any sort of government funding. And so I attended the Advocacy 101 with not a lot of expectations, but being open to the possibility, and basically took notes and was prepared to do every single thing that was recommended in the workshop. And as it so happened, the Dade County budget hearings were coming up, and really the budget was already quasi finalized, and we were sort of late to coming to the game. But anyway, we decided that we were going to experiment and go for it. And one of the things that was recommended was to show up with our people, with the people that we serve. And so that's what we did. We all got there. There was a couple of staff people, one board member, and about 6 graduates of the LEAP program. None of us really knowing what to expect. We were in the front row. We were with our T-shirts on. We were told to each of us address a different part of the program, and that's what we did. And all of us were nervous, but the women that were with us, some of them had just been out of prison a few weeks. One had been out for a year, and then everyone else in between. And so everyone was super nervous. And one in particular, Angelina, she is ordinarily a leader, sort of outspoken, and she just got up there and threw away her notes that we had gone over. And she told her story, and she cried, and the commissioners were crying, people in the audience were crying. At the end, everybody were giving us and her hugs. And we left that meeting not knowing whether we would get any sort of funding, but we didn't care. We felt so empowered. Angelina, who herself grew up in foster care, she had been in and out of prison. The time she's been with LEAP is the longest she's ever been sober. She's lots of long history of trauma. She was basically a victim long before anybody ever labeled her a criminal. And she related. It was the first time in her life that she ever felt heard. And she was somebody who really was not sure about whether she was going to stay with us. She had been working with us at our social enterprise, living in our house, and had been feeling the pull of sort of dysfunctional family. And that experience really made her see that she has a community here. And it's been several months, and we did end up getting more funding than we've ever received. And again, with that funding, which has been a total, totally changed the possibilities for us. But with that has also come more credibility and more people willing to look at our program. And it has also engaged our ladies, because they really are the most powerful voices for what we do. And on a more personal level, it's changed everything for Angelina. And that story also reminds me back again about 6 years ago. It was the second or third of the Women's Fund meetings. Back then they were doing the quarterly meetings. But I remember there was another woman that I brought, Renee, and I brought her to that smaller meeting, and she spoke. And she had the exact same experience, where she had spent 20 years in prison. And again, a long, very hard story. And she's not with LEAP anymore. She's not in the LEAP house. She's moved on. And I know that she is still in touch with other women from the Women's Fund. And so it's been a powerful experience in connection with her as well.